With Russell Wilson signing with the Giants, the NFL quarterback carousel is starting to take shape, and that's great news for Terry Fontenot and the Falcons. This move brings them one step closer to a significant gamble they took by holding on to Kirk Cousins after the fifth day of the new league year, which came with a hefty $10 million roster bonus. It's all about the numbers, really. Let's break down the quarterback situation. Right now, there are three teams with legitimate openings: the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Cleveland Browns, and the Tennessee Titans. The options for these teams are limited, with Aaron Rodgers likely heading to the Steelers and Cam Ward expected to be a top pick for the Titans in the upcoming draft. This leaves the Browns in a tough spot, making Kirk Cousins one of their more appealing options. The Falcons took a calculated risk, anticipating that with Wilson going to the Giants, one of these teams would be left without a quarterback. That team could very well reach out to Atlanta about Cousins. This is the moment the Falcons have been waiting for. With Wilson's move, we're getting closer to the end of the Kirk Cousins saga. I think many of us are ready to move on, but it's hard to ignore the buzz around him, especially since it's the biggest story right now. While I won't jump to conclusions about Cousins potentially joining the Browns just yet, I'm getting closer to saying it could happen. However, I'm not as confident as I was last offseason. One reason for my hesitation is something Albert Breer mentioned earlier this week. He pointed out that a potential hurdle for any team trading for Cousins is his desire to avoid a situation like last year, where he ended up with a team that drafted a quarterback. Cousins might choose to hold on to his no-trade clause until after the draft, allowing him to see which teams are committed to their rookie quarterbacks and which ones are not. So the Falcons are taking a significant gamble here, and it's a $10 million risk at that. If a team does trade for Cousins, they might be able to negotiate some of the salary, which currently stands at $37.5 million. I don't expect Atlanta or any team trading for him to cover the entire salary. There will likely be a split. Now let's talk about what Atlanta could expect in return. Josina Anderson suggested a third-round draft pick, but I think that's a bit optimistic. A more realistic expectation might be a conditional fifth-round pick. If Cousins goes to the Browns and plays 50% of the snaps, it could elevate to a fourth-round pick. If he plays 50% of the snaps and the Browns make the playoffs, or if they re-sign him, it could jump to a third-round pick. This structure would be similar to the trade involving Calvin Ridley, and it's more in line with what I expect for Cousins. If no one comes calling for Kirk Cousins, it could put Terry Fontenot in a tough spot, which I'll explain further in a moment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this situation. Do you think the Falcons should trade Kirk Cousins? You probably have a good idea of where I stand on this. I believe the Falcons should trade Kirk Cousins, and my reasoning goes beyond just financial considerations or draft capital. It's about the human element of the game. Ideally, a young quarterback should have a backup who is fully committed to supporting their development. It's not ideal to have a backup who is frustrated about being in that role, especially if they came to Atlanta with the expectation of being the starter. The nightmare scenario for the Falcons is if no one shows interest in Cousins, that would turn into a $10 million headache. It's like walking into a classroom for a test you didn't study for, or my personal nightmare of skipping an entire semester and then facing the final exam without any preparation. If August rolls around and the Falcons realize that no one wants Cousins, they might have to release him, effectively wasting that $10 million. Arthur Blank, the team owner, certainly wouldn't be thrilled about that outcome. Now, shifting gears, let's talk about Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot attending the same pro day together. They recently made a trip to Columbus, Ohio for the Ohio State Pro Day, and while it might seem like just part of their job, there's more to it. They were one of only 3 teams to send both their head coach and general manager to this event, alongside the Bears and the Steelers. In total, only 6 head coaches and 6 GMs attended, which highlights the significance of their presence. Last year, when Morris and Fontenot took a similar trip to the Pacific Northwest to scout Michael Penix Jr., it led to some important decisions. So, who might they be keeping an eye on at the Ohio State Pro Day? While they could be looking at the offensive line, I doubt that's their main focus. I don't think they're there to scout players like Josh Simmons or Donovan Jackson, nor are they likely interested in the running backs. That leaves us with 3 key players: Jack Sawyer, Ty Williams, and J.T. Twimolo. Let's break down these prospects, starting with Jack Sawyer. He was a highly touted recruit, and like many players at Ohio State, he possesses an incredible motor and unmatched effort. His power and brute strength are impressive, making him a player to watch closely. Jack Sawyer showcased his talent during Ohio State's run to the national championship, particularly in the college football playoff. While his numbers may not have fully met the high expectations set for him as a top recruit, he still made a significant impact as a team captain. He created chaos for opposing offenses, most notably with a crucial strip sack on Quinn Ewers that helped secure a victory for Ohio State. I see Sawyer developing into a solid defensive end at the next level, though I don't expect him to become a star. He's likely a round 2 or possibly round 3 pick. If you're looking for a player who will give maximum effort and win with strength, despite not having elite speed or agility, he's your guy. Next up is J.T. Twimolo, another highly regarded 5-star recruit from Ohio State and the Polynesian Player of the Year coming out of high school. He had a breakout season, racking up 12.5 sacks and proving to be a late bloomer. Twimolo played all 4 seasons in Columbus, and while he shares some similarities with Sawyer, he might have a slight edge in athleticism. I expect him to be drafted in round 2, likely going a bit earlier than Sawyer due to his impressive production this past season. He also made his mark in the college football playoff, recording 3 pass breakups and 2 forced fumbles in the final 4 games. While neither player is an elite athlete, Twimolo might be viewed as having a bit more upside. Finally, we have Ty Williams, who unfortunately suffered an injury while running the 40-yard dash at the Pro Day. He came to Ohio State weighing around 360 pounds, which was unmanageable, but he has since trimmed down to a more reasonable weight of about 320 pounds. At the Combine, he weighed in at 334 pounds. The Falcons might be interested in Williams as they look for a replacement for Grady Jarrett, although I wouldn't categorize him as a direct replacement. Jarrett had a notable pass-rushing ability, while Williams is more of a traditional nose tackle, similar to a player like Onuaku or Eddie Goldman. When Williams is at his best, he can be one of the top defensive tackles in this draft class, but his inconsistency raises concerns. Among these 3 players, it's likely that the Falcons are keeping a close eye on all of them as they evaluate their options for the upcoming draft. Each player brings something unique to the table, and it will be interesting to see how they fit into Atlanta's plans moving forward. If I had to choose one player to focus on, I'd probably lean toward J.T. Twimolo. His impressive 12.5 sack season could catch the Falcons' attention, especially if they're considering doubling down on edge rushers. I'd be surprised if any of these players are selected at pick 15, though. The Falcons might be contemplating a trade back in the first round to target someone around pick 25. Alternatively, they could be scouting Ty Williams, knowing they have a specific plan for their first-round pick. They might already have their sights set on one of 3 players: Michael Williams, J.T. Twimolo, or Mike Green. If that's the case, they could be looking for a new interior defensive lineman. However, it's worth noting that they drafted a defensive lineman in round 2 last year, and while it's possible to go back to that well, Williams would be more of a 1-technique player, whereas the previous pick was more of a 3-technique. It might seem like overkill to invest another early draft pick in the interior defensive line, especially after adding players like Rook, Brandon Dorlus, and Zion Logue last year. It could make more sense to focus on edge again or even look at cornerback, but then again, when it comes to building the Falcons' defensive line, more might be better. As we wrap up this discussion about Ohio State's Pro Day, I want to hear from you. Shout out your college. You all know where I went, and I know some of you aren't fans of it, but that's okay. Let me know where you went to school and who you cheer for on Saturdays in the comments below.